They found her standing at my door at exactly midnight, her knuckles still raised to knock again. But here's what made my blood run cold. The girl had been dead for 3 years. I know because I was the detective who closed her case. My name is Detective Arthur Pemberton, and what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you thought you knew about death, love, and the promises we make to those we've lost. This is the case that ended my career and began my real life's work. The knocking begins. The first time I heard it, I thought I was dreaming. 3 sharp knocks, deliberate and measured, echoing through my modest London flat. I opened my eyes to darkness and checked my pocket watch on the nightstand. Midnight exactly. I lay there listening to the rain hammer against the windows, convincing myself it was just the old building settling, just the wind playing tricks. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. I grabbed my revolver from the drawer and moved through the darkness toward my front door. My hands were steady. After 15 years with Scotland Yard, I'd faced armed criminals, witnessed horrors that would break lesser men, and learned to trust my instincts above all else. Those instincts were now screaming that something was terribly wrong. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty, just shadows and the faint gaslight from the street lamp below filtering through the window at the end of the corridor. I checked the stairs, looked up and down, found nothing. The other residents were surely asleep. It was November 1892, and decent people didn't wander at midnight. I returned to bed but couldn't sleep. Something about those knocks felt intentional, almost desperate. I'd heard desperation before in the voices of victims' families, in the final words of dying men. This felt the same. The next night I sat in my armchair fully dressed, waiting. The fire had burned down to embers, and my watch showed 5 minutes to midnight. I told myself I was being foolish, that I needed rest, that I was working too hard on the Whitechapel investigations. But I couldn't shake the feeling. At midnight precisely, the knocking came. This time I was at the door in seconds, flinging it open with such force it crashed against the wall. And there she stood. She couldn't have been more than 12 years old, wearing a simple white nightdress that was soaked through despite no rain falling tonight. Her long, dark hair hung in wet tangles around her pale face, and her feet were bare and muddy. But it was her eyes that stopped my heart. They were filled with such profound sadness and urgency that I felt it like a physical blow. "Please," she whispered. "You have to help her. She's running out of time. Who are you? How did you get in this building? Where are your parents?" The questions tumbled out, but she was already backing away, shaking her head. "Tomorrow night," she said. "Midnight. You'll understand." Then she turned and ran down the hallway with impossible speed, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floors. I chased her, but when I reached the stairs, she'd vanished. I checked every floor, knocked on doors, woke angry neighbors who'd seen and heard nothing. The night doorman swore on his mother's grave that no child had entered the building all evening. I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk and lit every lamp in my flat, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. Hallucination brought on by exhaustion, a prank by neighborhood children, anything but what my gut was telling me, because my gut was saying things that couldn't be true. At dawn, I went to the yard and pulled every missing children case from the past 5 years. I studied faces, read reports, searching for a girl who matched what I'd seen. And then I found her, and my hands started shaking so badly I nearly dropped the file. Eleanor Ashford, age 12, disappeared from her home in Kensington on November 8, 1889, exactly 3 years ago. Her body had been found 2 weeks later in the Thames. I remembered the case because I'd worked it myself. The parents had been devastated, destroyed by grief. The mother had never recovered. The father had turned to drink. I opened the file and stared at the photograph they'd provided. It was her, the same dark hair, the same delicate features, the same eyes that now haunted me. But this was impossible. Eleanor Ashford was dead. I'd seen her body myself. I'd attended her funeral. That day at the yard passed in a blur. My colleagues asked if I was well. I wasn't. I was coming undone, unraveling thread by thread. I'd built my entire life on logic, on evidence, on things that could be proven and documented. What I'd seen last night existed outside those boundaries. I went home early, unable to concentrate. I pulled out my old notebooks from 1889 and reread every detail of Eleanor's case. She'd vanished from her bedroom in the middle of the night. Her window had been found open, but they lived on the 3rd floor. No signs of forced entry, no ransom demand, just a child who disappeared like smoke. When they'd found her body, it had been in the water for days. The coroner had ruled drowning, though he couldn't determine if it was accident, suicide, or murder. The case went cold. Her parents buried her in Highgate Cemetery. Life moved on, as it always does, indifferent to grief. But apparently, Eleanor hadn't moved on. At 11 that night, I sat in my armchair again, my revolver loaded and ready. I didn't know what I expected to do with it. You can't shoot a ghost. But holding it made me feel less helpless, more in control. The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. Midnight arrived. The knocking began. This time I opened the door calmly, almost peacefully. Eleanor stood there, looking exactly as she had the night before, dripping wet and barefoot. "Thank you for waiting," she said, her voice carrying a strange echo, as if it came from very far away. "I didn't think you would—" "Eleanor Ashford," I said quietly. "You died 3 years ago. I attended your funeral." She nodded, tears mixing with the water that ran down her face. "I did die, Mr. Pemberton, but I can't rest. Not while she's still in danger." Who's in danger?" "My sister, Rose. She's 9 now. The same man who killed me is going to take her. Tomorrow night if you don't stop him." Her voice broke on the last word, and I saw such anguish in her young face that my own eyes burned. "Your parents only had 1 daughter," I said carefully. "The file says—" "The file is wrong. Rose is my half-sister. My father's daughter from an affair. My mother never acknowledged her, never let her live with us. She stays with our cousin in Whitechapel. But she's my sister, and I loved her, and I failed to warn her before. I can't fail again." My mind was racing. This was madness. I was having a conversation with a dead child about preventing a murder that hadn't happened yet. Everything I'd learned, everything I believed, said this was impossible. But I was also a detective, and detectives follow the evidence. The evidence was standing in front of me, pleading for help. "Tell me everything," I said. "Start from the beginning." Eleanor's story spilled out in a torrent of words, 3 years of silence breaking like a dam. She discovered the affair, found letters between her father and Rose's mother. She'd wanted to meet her sister, this secret sibling she'd never known. She'd been sneaking out at night, visiting Rose in Whitechapel, forming a bond. But someone had been watching, a man she only knew as Mr. Gray. She'd seen him following Rose, watching her play in the streets. She'd tried to warn her parents, but they hadn't believed her. "Children have such wild imaginations," they'd said. "Stop making up stories." The night Eleanor disappeared, she'd gone to warn Rose that Mr. Gray was getting closer, bolder, but he'd found Eleanor instead. He'd taken her to the docks, and when she'd fought and screamed, he'd thrown her in the river. Her last thoughts, as the dark water closed over her head, had been of Rose, of failing to protect her little sister. "I've been trying to reach someone, anyone, for 3 years," Eleanor said, her ghostly form flickering slightly in the lamplight. "But most people can't see can't hear me. You're different, Mr. Pemberton. You see things others miss. It's why you're a good detective. It's why I chose you." "Why now?" I asked. "Why tomorrow night?" "Because tomorrow is Rose's birthday. The same age I was when he took me. He has a pattern, Mr. Pemberton. He takes girls when they turn 12. There have been others before me. There will be more after Rose if you don't stop him." The weight of what she was asking crashed down on me. I was supposed to believe this ghost, investigate based on supernatural testimony, prevent a crime that might not even happen. My career would be over if anyone found out. I'd be laughed out of the yard, possibly committed to an asylum. But I looked at Eleanor's desperate face, at this child who couldn't rest, couldn't move on, because love for her sister kept her tethered to a world that had failed her. And I knew I didn't have a choice. "Where is Rose now?" I asked. "With my cousin Margaret Webb at 47 Burner Street. Please, Mr. Pemberton, save her. Don't let me have died for nothing." I grabbed my coat and hat. "I'll go now, tonight. I'll watch the house, make sure she's safe." For the first time, something like hope crossed Eleanor's pale features. Thank you. I'll come tomorrow night at midnight. If Rose is safe, I can finally rest. If she's not—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I ran through the dark London streets, my breath misting in the cold November air. Burner Street was deep in Whitechapel, a neighborhood I knew too well from my work. Poverty, crime, and desperation soaked into every brick. This was where the Ripper had hunted just 4 years ago, and Fierce T. LL hung in the air like fog. Number 47 was a shabby tenement building. I knocked on Margaret Webb's door and waited, rehearsing what I'd say. "How do you tell someone their cousin's daughter is in danger based on information from a ghost?" Margaret answered, a worn woman in her 30s with suspicious eyes. "Who are you? What do you want at this hour?" I showed her my credentials. "I'm Detective Pemberton from Scotland Yard. I have reason to believe Rose may be in danger. May I come in?" The suspicion turned to fear. "Rose? What kind of danger? She's just a child. She hasn't done anything wrong." "I know, but I need you to trust me. Has anyone been watching the house, following Rose? A man, perhaps wearing gray?" Margaret's face went white. "How did you know?" "There's been a man these past few weeks. Always across the street, always watching. I thought I was imagining it, but Rose mentioned him too. Said he smiled at her, offered her sweets. I told her to stay away from strangers, but in this neighborhood, who isn't a stranger?" My heart was hammering. Eleanor had been right. This was real. "Is Rose here now? Is she safe?" "She's asleep. I locked the doors. I'm careful. Tomorrow's her birthday, isn't it?" Margaret nodded, tears forming. "She turns 12 tomorrow. I was going to make her a cake, small as I could afford. How is this happening? How do you know all this?" I couldn't tell her the truth. Instead, I said, "I'm working several cases involving missing girls. There's a pattern. I think your Rose might be the next target." I stayed the rest of that night, sitting in a chair by the window, watching the street. Margaret made tea we didn't drink. At dawn, I saw him. A man in a gray coat, tall and thin, standing across the street, watching. Just as Eleanor had said. I went down to confront him, but by the time I reached the street, he'd vanished into the morning crowds. I spent the day making arrangements. I stationed 2 constables in plain clothes near the building. I had Margaret keep Rose inside, told her not to answer the door to anyone. I pulled records of missing girls from the past decade and found the pattern Eleanor had mentioned. Every few years, a girl around 12, always around their birthday, always from poor neighborhoods, bodies found in the Thames or never found at all. This had been happening for years, and no one had connected it. No one had cared enough about these forgotten children to see the pattern. But Eleanor had cared. Even in death she cared. That night, I waited in Margaret's flat, my revolver ready. Rose sat at the table, confused and frightened by all the attention. She was a small thing, all dark eyes and nervous energy, and I could see Eleanor in her features. Sisters separated by class and scandal, connected by blood and love. The hours passed. 10 o'clock. 11. Nothing. The constables reported no sign of the man in gray. Maybe we'd scared him off. Maybe Eleanor had been wrong about the timing. At 5 minutes to midnight, there was a knock at the door. Margaret looked at me. I shook my head. She didn't move. The knock came again, more insistent. "Miss Webb? It's Constable Morrison. We've seen something suspicious. You need to come out." I moved to the door, looked through the crack. The hallway was empty. It wasn't the constable. I gestured for Margaret to take Rose to the bedroom. Locked themselves in. Then I opened the door with my revolver raised. The man in gray stood there, his smile cold and terrible. "Detective Pemberton, you're quite the nuisance." He moved fast, faster than seemed possible, knocking the gun from my hand. We struggled in the narrow hallway, crashing into walls. He was strong, unnaturally so, and I realized with horror that he was older than I'd thought. Much older. His face was unlined, but his eyes held decades of cruelty. "You can't stop this," he hissed in my ear. "I've been taking these girls for 30 years. They're mine. It's my right, my tradition. And Rose is perfect, just like Eleanor was perfect." Rage gave me strength. I drove my elbow into his ribs, heard something crack. He stumbled back, and I retrieved my revolver. "You killed Eleanor Ashford." He laughed, actually laughed. "Is that what she told you? Did the little ghost come crying?" "They always linger, you know, the special ones. They can't let go. It's quite tiresome." The bedroom door burst open, and Rose ran out before Margaret could stop her. She saw the man and screamed, a sound of pure recognition and terror. She'd seen him before. In her nightmares, perhaps. In the dark corners of memory where monsters live. The man in gray lunged for her. I fired. The shot echoed in the small space, deafening. He fell, clutching his shoulder, his gray coat blooming red. The constables burst in, alerted by the gunshot. It was over, or so I thought. The truth in darkness. They arrested Mr. Gray, whose real name turned out to be Cornelius Blackwood, a clerk who lived alone and had no family, no friends, no one who would miss him if he disappeared. His home as a chamber of horrors. We found items belonging to 17 girls, trophies spanning 3 decades, locks of hair, photographs, journals, each one carefully preserved, labeled with dates and names. Eleanor's white hair ribbon was there, kept in a small wooden box. But what disturbed me most were the mirrors. Every wall in his flat was covered with mirrors, dozens of them, all facing each other, and in the reflection, if you looked carefully in the right light, you could see them. The girls. Shadowy figures trapped in the glass, watching, waiting. The department's psychiatrist said Blackwood was insane, that he'd had a psychotic break. But I knew better. I'd seen Eleanor. I knew what lived in those mirrors. Blackwood hadn't just killed these girls. He'd trapped them somehow, kept them from moving on. They were prisoners in the space between life and death, and he fed on their anguish. The case should have made my career, solving a 3-decade killing spree, saving Rose, bringing justice for Eleanor and 16 other girls. But I couldn't tell anyone how I'd known. I couldn't put a ghost told me in my official report. So I lied. I said I'd been following leads on missing girls, had noticed the pattern, had gotten lucky with timing. My superiors were satisfied. The newspapers called me a hero, but that night, at midnight, I waited in my flat for Eleanor. I needed to see her one more time, needed to know if she could finally rest now that Rose was safe and her killer caught. The knock came right on time. I opened the door, and there she stood, but she looked different. Less substantial, more transparent. The water no longer dripped from her nightdress. She seemed at peace. "You saved her," Eleanor said. And her smile was radiant, the first time I'd seen her truly smile. "Rose is safe. The others, they can rest now too. He can't hold us anymore." "The mirrors," I said. "What did he do?" "He was old, Mr. Pemberton, much older than he looked. He'd found a way to extend his life by stealing ours, trapping our souls. Each girl he took gave him another few years. But you broke the pattern. You freed us all." I felt tears on my face, the first I'd cried since I was a boy. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you 3 years ago. I'm sorry I didn't believe you when you tried to warn people. You didn't know. No one knew. But you believed me when it mattered most. You saved my sister. That's all I ever wanted." She was fading now, becoming part of the shadows and lamplight. "Eleanor, wait. What happens now? Where do you go?" "Somewhere better. Somewhere warm and full of light. I can see it now, Mr. Pemberton. I can see my real mother waiting for me. Not the woman who raised me, but the one who died when I was born. She's been waiting all this time." Her voice was barely a whisper now. "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for hearing me. Thank you for caring about a dead girl no one else remembered. I'll always remember, I promised. I'll make sure Rose knows about you. I'll make sure your story is told. Tell her I loved her. Tell her to have a wonderful life, full of all the birthdays I never got. Tell her—" But Eleanor was gone, dissolved into the air like morning mist. The hallway was empty. This time I knew she wouldn't be back. I kept my promise. I visited Rose and Margaret regularly over the next months. I made sure they had to live on. Pulling strings to get Margaret better work. Making sure Rose could attend school. I told Rose stories about her sister. About how Eleanor had loved her so much that not even death could break that bond. As for Cornelius Blackwood, he was convicted and hanged. On the night of his execution, 17 women gathered outside the prison, the mothers and sisters of his victims, there to witness justice. When the trap door opened and Blackwood fell, several women later swore they saw something. A gathering of young girls in white, standing in a circle around the gallows, holding hands. And when it was over, they vanished like candle flames in the wind. I left Scotland Yard 6 months later. The case had changed me in ways I couldn't explain to my colleagues. I'd seen beyond the veil, glimpsed the machinery of the universe that most people never witness. I couldn't go back to seeing the world as purely physical, purely rational. I became a private investigator specializing in cold cases, particularly those involving missing children. I had a reputation for solving the unsolvable, for finding answers where others saw only dead ends. What I didn't tell anyone was that sometimes the dead themselves pointed the way. Not often, but sometimes, when the love was strong enough, when the need was great enough, they found ways to reach across that divide. I helped reunite families, brought closure to parents who'd spent years wondering. I found bodies so they could be properly buried. I caught killers who thought they'd gotten away with it. And sometimes, late at night, I'd feel a presence in my office. A warmth, a sense of peace. I like to think it was Eleanor, Che, King in, making sure I was still fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. Rose grew up safe and loved. She married a good man, had children of her own. On the anniversary of Eleanor's death each year, she'd visit the grave and leave white ribbons. She'd tell her children about the sister she'd never really known, but who'd loved her enough to defy death itself. The story became family legend, passed down through generations. As for me, I'm an old man now, writing this account in 1923. I've investigated hundreds of cases, seen things that would break most people's minds. But I've never forgotten that November night in 1892 when a dead girl knocked on my door and taught me the most important lesson of my life. Love is stronger than death. It's stronger than time. It's the one force in this universe that can bridge the gap between worlds. Eleanor Ashford was 12 years old when she died, but she was braver and more determined than most adults I've known. She saved her sister. She freed 17 souls from torment. She changed my life and, through my work, changed countless others. They say the dead can't speak, but I know better. They speak to those who are willing to listen. And if you're very lucky, if you're very brave, you might hear them knock at your door at midnight asking for help. When that happens, don't turn them away. Don't dismiss it as impossible. Open the door. Listen to their story. Because sometimes the dead need us just as much as we need them. Sometimes a ghost knocking at midnight isn't something to fear. Sometimes it's someone who loves so fiercely that even the grave can't silence them. And that, more than any horror I've witnessed, is what truly haunts me. Not the darkness of death, but the brilliant, terrible, beautiful power of love that refuses to end. Eleanor taught me to see that light. I've spent my life following it, helping it shine in dark places. And when my time comes, when I pass beyond that veil myself, I hope I'll see her again. I hope she'll be there, smiling in that radiant way she smiled when she knew Rose was safe. I hope she'll take my hand and say, "Well done, Mr. Pemberton, well done." Until then, I keep listening, I keep watching. And when midnight comes and I hear those 3 measured knocks, I don't hesitate. I open the door. Because love never dies, it just waits for someone brave enough to answer when it calls. This story reminds us that the bonds we forge in life echo beyond death, that love is the one force powerful enough to break all boundaries, even those between the living and the dead. It tells us to listen to those who cry for help, even when doing so seems impossible. It shows us that one person choosing to believe, to care, to act, can change everything. Eleanor's story isn't about ghosts or horror. It's about a sister's love, a detective's courage, and the truth that we're never truly gone as long as someone remembers us with love.